Story 1. The locked cabin in the woods. It was my junior year of high school when our history teacher announced a field trip to a state park about an hour and a half away. Everyone groaned, thinking it was going to be one of those boring walks with pamphlets about trees and birds. I didn't complain, though. Getting out of a whole school day sounded good enough to me. The day we went, it was early October. The air had that damp chill, and the sky was an overcast gray that made everything look dull and lifeless. Our bus rumbled down winding back roads, the woods on either side thick with red and brown leaves. When we finally pulled into the park's gravel lot, the ranger waiting for us didn't look like the friendly type you see in brochures. He was tall, gaunt, with a beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in months. His green uniform was faded, and his eyes, they didn't match his smile. He gave a short speech about how the park was full of history and warned us to stick with the group because it was easy to get lost in these woods. His voice was low and flat, almost like he didn't want us there. We started our hike along a narrow dirt trail. The trees pressed close, their branches arching over us like a tunnel. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just the crunch of our shoes. That's when I noticed the cabins. Old decaying wooden cabins sat scattered in small clearings off the trail. The ranger said they used to be part of a logging camp back in the 1930s, abandoned after a fire swept through. Most of the kids didn't care. They were more interested in sneaking pictures and laughing. But something about those cabins drew me in. The dark windows gaped like hollow eyes. When our teacher paused the group near a stream, my friend Kyle nudged me and whispered, "Bet you won't check one out." Of course, I had to prove him wrong. We slipped away quietly, trailing off the path until we reached the nearest cabin. Its roof sagged, and the wooden walls were blackened as if from smoke. The door was swollen shut, but after some pushing, it creaked open with a sharp crack. The air inside was stale and bitter, like wet ash. At first it was just empty space, rotted floorboards, broken furniture, rusted tools. But then I noticed the back wall. It had scratches, long deep gouges etched into the wood, crisscrossing wildly. "Dude," Kyle whispered. "What the hell did that?" I told myself it was animals. Had to be. But then I saw the lock on the inside of the door. Someone hadn't been trying to keep something out. They'd been trying to keep themselves in. Kyle wanted to leave, but I couldn't stop staring at those scratches. There was something desperate about them, like whoever made them had clawed until their fingers broke. And then we heard it. A sound from the corner of the cabin. At first, I thought it was just wood settling. But no, it was too deliberate. A faint dragging noise, like nails scraping slowly across the floorboards. We froze. The cabin was too dark to see clearly, but in that far corner, I swore I saw movement. A hunched shadow shifting against the wall. "Go," I whispered. We bolted, slamming the door shut behind us. When we rejoined the group, no one even noticed we'd been gone. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, just the wind, just the house creaking, but later when we got back to the ranger station, something made my blood run cold. Pinned to the bulletin board by the entrance was a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Campers vanish near old logging cabins. No remains found." The date was from 1979, and taped beneath it, another article. Teenagers missing after exploring abandoned cabin. The picture showed the exact same cabin Kyle and I had gone into. I didn't say anything the whole bus ride home. But that night, as I lay in bed, I swore I heard the same faint dragging sound, slow nails scraping against wood coming from inside my closet. Story 2. The Man in the Museum Basement. In 8th grade, my class took a field trip to a small local history museum about 40 minutes outside of town. It wasn't anything fancy, just one of those old brick buildings that towns repurpose to display artifacts, faded photographs, and dusty glass cases. At first, the trip was as boring as I expected. Our guide, an elderly woman with a sharp voice, led us through exhibits about coal mining, farming equipment, and pioneer tools. Most kids whispered, joked, or tried to sneak on their phones. I stayed near the back of the group, zoning out. Then the guide mentioned something that made me perk up. She said, almost as an afterthought, "Some parts of the museum aren't open to the public, especially the basement. It's unsafe." That instantly caught my attention. The basement. I nudged my friend Dylan. Bet there's something creepy down there, I whispered. He smirked. Want to find out? We hung back when the group moved toward the next room. While everyone crowded around a display of antique sewing machines, Dylan and I slipped away. The museum halls were dim and smelled of old wood and varnish. After a few wrong turns, we found a narrow staircase leading downward, blocked by a flimsy rope and a sign that said, "Staff only." Dylan grinned. That's an invitation. We ducked under the rope and crept down. The air grew colder the deeper we went, and the smell changed. Damp, like earth and mildew. The stairs creaked under our weight, and when we reached the bottom, I realized just how wrong the guide had been. The basement wasn't empty. It was full. Rows of old furniture were piled against the walls. Broken mannequins leaned in corners, their faces chipped, eyes missing. Dust-covered boxes were stacked everywhere, some half open, revealing yellowed papers or rusted tools. Our footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as we explored. "Creepy," Dylan whispered, shining his phone flashlight around. That's when we saw it. At the far end of the basement was a heavy metal door. Unlike everything else, it looked newer, scratched but solid. With a small wired glass window at the top, something about it felt out of place. Wrong. I don't know why. But Dylan knocked. The sound echoed through the basement. At first, nothing happened. Then from behind the door came a sound, a faint shuffle. We froze. Then came another noise, a slow dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I felt my stomach drop. Dylan whispered, "Someone's in there." We leaned closer to the little wired glass window, trying to see through the grime. At first it was just blackness. Then slowly something pale moved into view. A face. But it wasn't right. The skin was too white, almost gray. The eyes were wide, unblinking, pressed up close to the glass. And the mouth. It stretched into a grin so big it didn't look human anymore. I stumbled back. Dylan swore under his breath. The face didn't move away. It just stayed there, pressed against the glass, grinning. And then, the door handle rattled. We bolted, sprinting back up the stairs 2 steps at a time. I nearly tripped, but Dylan yanked me up and we burst back into the main floor of the museum. Gasping. No one had noticed we were gone. The guide droned on about another display as if nothing had happened. We never told anyone. What would we even say? That there was someone locked in the basement? But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying it. That face, those eyes, that impossible grin. And the way the door handle shook. Like whatever was behind it wasn't supposed to get out, but wanted to. Sometimes, even now when I pass old buildings, I swear I see movement in the basement windows. A pale face. Watching. Story 3. The Forgotten Asylum. By senior year, most of us thought field trips were for little kids. So when our psychology teacher announced we'd be visiting a historic mental health facility for an educational tour, everyone perked up. It wasn't just any building, it was an abandoned asylum on the edge of the county. Shut down decades ago after reports of neglect and unethical practices. That word alone, unethical, made the whole class buzz with excitement. We were finally going somewhere that sounded like it had stories. The asylum loomed at the end of a long, cracked driveway, its red brick walls climbing 4 stories high. Most of the windows were boarded up. The rest were dark, like empty eyes. Our guide was a young man in a cheap polo shirt who didn't look much older than us. He gave the usual warnings about sticking with the group, not wandering into restricted wings, and being careful of rotting floors. Inside, the air smelled of mold, rust, and something faintly sour that made my stomach twist. The hallways echoed with our footsteps. Peeling paint curled off the walls like dead skin, and every door was either rusted shut or hanging loose on its hinges. Most of the tour was what you'd expect. The guide talked about treatments from the early 1900s, showing us rusted wheelchairs and medical charts. We all whispered, laughed nervously, and snapped pictures for Snapchat. But then, as we were leaving one wing, I noticed a door at the end of the hall. Unlike the others, it wasn't boarded up or broken. It stood slightly open, and inside I thought I saw movement. I slowed down. Something about that dark crack in the doorway pulled at me. When I looked back, the group was already turning the corner. I told myself I'd only peek for a second. The room beyond was small. Dust floated in the air, caught in the faint light from a grimy window. In the center of the room was a chair, metal bolted to the floor, with cracked leather restraints dangling from its arms. And behind the chair, in the shadows, stood a figure. Tall, still, facing the wall. "Hello?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The figure twitched. Then its head turned slowly, too slowly, to look at me. The face was wrong. Too pale, the eyes too dark, like pits. I stumbled back into the hall just as Dylan, yeah, same Dylan from the museum trip, grabbed my shoulder. "Dude, what are you doing?" "We're leaving." I glanced back at the room. It was empty. The chair sat in the center, restraints dangling, but there was no figure, no one. Shaken, I followed Dylan back to the group, saying nothing. The tour ended soon after, and we boarded the bus. Everyone was laughing, scrolling through their phones, talking about how lame it had been, but I couldn't stop staring out the window as we pulled away. Because in one of the broken upper windows of the asylum, I saw a face, pale, watching, and when the bus turned onto the road, I swear I heard it just faintly scratching, like fingernails dragging across glass. That night I dreamed of that room, the chair, the figure behind it, and when I woke up my wrists ached, red marks circling them as if something had been holding me down.